Namaste and welcome to a very special episode of the Bharat Varta Weekly. Wish you a very happy Independence Day for all those tuning in. I have my friends Nirav and Abhishek here to run you through the news and events of the week that was. Hi Nirav, hi Abhishek. Wish you a very happy Independence Day.
Hi,
Hi,
Roshan. Hi, Nirav.
hi Abhishek. Happy Independence Day to all our listeners as well.
Right. So we have plenty to cover. So let's get started. So last week we put out a couple of very interesting podcasts. One was Mahabharata Unraveled with the author Ami Ganatra. I think every year I discover newer facts and perspectives about Mahabharata, and this book really brings out some lesser known facts. Right? Was Karna really such a fallen hero, or was Yudhishthir so naive, or what was Draupadi's role, and so on and so forth. I think we discussed many different perspectives. It was really fascinating. Very data driven also, I would say. Right? So do check out this superb episode. And of course, we had a stellar podcast with Swaminathan Gurumurthy ji, who is, of course, an ideologue, philosopher, and a journalist of, probably among the most reputable people in India right now, right? And he's had a long track record of, talking about Indian culture and things to that effect. And he spoke about, how Western influences have still not managed to sort of displace what we have as native culture here, and why that is the case, and why we are strong and rooted, right? So fantastic podcasts, both of them. Do check it out. Theme of the week is independence. Prime Minister Narendra Modi unfurled the national flag at the Red Fort in New Delhi this morning and addressed the nation. In 75 weeks of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, 75 Vande Bharat trains will run, connecting different parts of the country, the Prime Minister announced, giving a call for Sabka Prayas, along with Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and Sabka Vishwas for building a new India. Prime Minister Modi said, we have to ensure we meet our goal of building Atmanirbhar Bharat when we celebrate 100 years of India's independence. 25 years from now. And also, August 14th will now be commemorated as Partition Horrors Day. Prime Minister Narendra Modi declared Saturday that August 14th would now be observed as Partition Horrors Remembrance Day. He added that the day remembered for India's partition into two countries, India and Pakistan, would remind Indians of the need to remove the poison of social divisions. This day will commemorate the struggles and sacrifices of millions who were displaced and who lost their lives during partition. Abhishek, your general thoughts on everything?
Yeah, Carrie. So, yesterday this was an interesting announcement made by the PM. The decision to have August 14 now as the Partition Horrors Remembrance Day. I guess somewhat expectedly, it sort of became an issue of partisan bickering on social media. I mean, if you take it at the face value, probably a call to educate India's newer generations about what happened during those partition times. Because I guess as time wears on, India's probably the younger generation are not so much aware as the past generations who have lived through it, or who were just sort of one generation removed from that event. Many countries around the world do have similar sort of things to remember, such as, let's say, the Holocaust in Europe and so on. So it is not something which is very unusual. Of course, the other side of the political divide took exception to this and sort of said that, this is yet another sort of move to divide the society further. So, I mean, your take on this is probably going to be decided on your current political leanings. Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. So coming back to the more important thing of the 75th Independence Day celebrations, I think the last year has been a very challenging year for the country, right? April-May period was probably among the toughest period that India has faced in a long time. We are sort of still trying to emerge out of the whole general COVID situation, but especially the wave 2 scenario where so many people died, unfortunately. Right. So I think some of those things were reflected in the PM's speech today as well. So he really honored the scientists and who developed the vaccines, as well as India's healthcare workers, right, who have done a stellar job, as we keep noting in various episodes, right, in terms of vaccination and fighting the pandemic. So that was one thing. And I mean, it's very important to reiterate the whole Atmanirbhar Bharat theme in terms of vaccination itself, right? Because there's no doubt that India would have been lagging far behind if in this battle if we did not have our own vaccines, right? So that's a very big achievement for India, and we must commend all those who were involved in it. Then he talked about some other things. He talked about how India's youth did really well at the Olympics, and we have to sort of now become a sporting nation and all that. A few other important things that he touched upon today. He coined a new phrase. Along with the usual phrasing of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, he now added Sabka Prayas, which means national development falls on each and every one of us. So everyone's efforts have to count towards developing the country. So that was a very interesting coinage. You already talked about those 75 trains that are being launched as part of this. So he talked about that along with other things so there is a Gati Shakti scheme that will come up soon, basically to give a holistic approach towards infrastructure in India. I mean, infrastructure is the buzzword around the world as well, with the US announcing a massive package. And I think India too is probably going to come up with a national master plan soon on national infrastructure construction. He also talked a lot about small farmers today. I think there was a lot of emphasis on small farmers and making things better for them, improving their lot and so on. Probably there is also a political angle to it with the whole farm protests that are going on, right? So he definitely sounded that the government is committed to improving the lot of farmers. Quite impressive fact told today was the Jal Jeevan Mission scheme, right? So 4.5 crore new households with piped water connection in the last 2 years. So this is a transformative project which is underway and is actually making a big impact on the ground, right? And some other things about, providing fortified rice, all India's poor by 2024. He talked about opening Sainik schools to all girl children going forward, something which was a demand for a long time. He also talked about entrepreneurship from villages. I think something which Bharat Varta also talked about in that Jaipur Rugs episode. So he definitely looks at entrepreneurship as something which is important to develop the country. And in that light, how the optical fiber network growing across the country and internet and broadband reaching everywhere is basically going to help small entrepreneurs across the country, right? So I mean, there are many other things, but overall he gave a sort of positive account going into the next year, and let's hope that we are able to contain the pandemic better going forward. And it's important, right? Because our economic growth is also linked to how well we contain the disease and open up as soon as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, very nice summary of the Prime Minister's speech. And I think just to add to that, right, I think we often forget how gigantic an event the partition was. Over 10 million people displaced. That's probably the largest human migration in recorded history. More than 200,000, or by some records, even up to 2 million people died in the process, right? And it's often forgotten because two nations celebrate their independence around that time. So I think it's something that has to live in people's memory, I would say, right? Especially as very limited households will have someone from pre-independence era as well, right? Who can sort of keep that memory alive. So I think from that perspective, it's necessary and it's an important part of our history as well that we should acknowledge. Perhaps the most difficult year that I have at least seen in India, right? I mean, with this whole pandemic and everything, and the way our scientists and health workers have really rallied, to really uplift the nation is tremendous. What a time to build state capacity, right? It's just amazing, right? 50 crore plus vaccinations have happened. Maybe even 5 years from now, we look back at this and think about, what an amazing feat this was, managing everything. Nirav, quick comments from you and then we'll move on.
I think you guys have covered most of the things on independence. I think one of the other things is it's a good practice right now that every Independence Day, Prime Minister Modi announces one of his policies and then also follows up on what has happened. I think we'll be talking about it later, but 2 years ago, the Jal Jeevan Mission was started and laid out a very aggressive plan. And now he's also talking again about it on what has been achieved so far. And I think this is a good platform of to remember what all things the country has achieved and what all are the goals and targets. And I think this form of open communication has been quite a good feature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about the Jal Jeevan Mission later on in the podcast. Moving on, in some very positive news, India has yet again hit record numbers for July exports. India exported goods worth $35.43 billion in July, the highest first time ever in a month, due to a recovery in key global markets and robust demand. Outbound shipments grew by nearly 50% over July 2020. Compared to pre-COVID levels, the growth was 35% from July 2019. The growth was led by higher demand for engineering goods, gems and jewelry, textiles and apparels, chemicals and electronic goods, and so on. So Nirav, is it the throes of a full-fledged economic recovery in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think exactly what has happened is, if you see from in this financial year from April, we've had numbers of about like 30, 32, and now 35 billion. So in the 4 months, we've exported goods worth 130 billion. We've also exported services, mainly software services, about 15 to 18 billion a month. So what has happened is, due to COVID, while India and demand in India has suffered, I think in the developed countries, there has been a record stimulus. And what had happened a lot of in 2020 was all the stimulus flooded into buying goods from like China, Vietnam, etc. And India was pretty much impacted quite heavily in 2020, so could not respond to that. But now we are getting in there and trying capturing a good share of international demand via exports. Also, this is also a way of diversification in our own economy. I think the recovery from COVID will be led by exports, and this provides employment. The government has also done a very good production-linked incentive, or the PLI schemes, so which is incentivizing domestic production. The concept of Atmanirbhar, it doesn't just mean a closed economy and be self-reliant. It is self-reliant and sell goods to others so that it pays for the other imports that we need. Which one of the main one is energy imports or crude oil imports. So this is a very big positive. I think we've just started seeing this. The whole world has actually learned. One biggest learning from COVID has been you cannot be over-reliant on one supplier. And what has happened is you are overly dependent on China, and the world needs to diversify away from it. India is showing that it can respond to an increase in global demand, and it has delivered on these exports. It's still quite a low base, but hopefully these figures keep rising and we see $50 billion a month of exports probably next year, this time. So fingers crossed, and this will fuel, or this will prime the pump for our recovery coming out of COVID.
Yogi Adityanath and Arvind Kejriwal have instituted alcohol reforms in their states. The chief ministers of India's two most hotly discussed states are fronting some of the boldest liquor policy reforms. Delhi's new policies in particular will clear the way for home delivery of liquor, microbreweries, walk-in liquor stores, and 24/7 licenses for bars. Uttar Pradesh is setting itself up to be the premier destination for investment in this field. Yogi Ji's government has made a shift to favor softer drinks like beer and wine over harder ones like whiskey, rum, vodka, and gin. Nirav, so is this like, general thoughts?
No, so actually, I would like to comment like a few things, right? Both these chief ministers have been quite pragmatic. Both are teetotalers, but that doesn't mean that they impose their personal views on like rest of the country. Alcohol has not been a part of the GST, and that excise duties are separate. It's quite a large tax revenue source, as well as what has happened is during COVID, Delhi actually had increased the cess on alcohol quite a bit last year. And that experiment saw like the sales of alcohol fall quite sharply, tax revenues came down, and they've realized that, so Kejriwal has realized that that experiment has failed. So they've not only reduced duties, they've also said that while alcohol consumption, you might have moral opinions on it, but it is something which is there and it's not going to go away. If you had prohibitions or very heavy taxes, actually that goes to illicit liquor dens, which are making unregulated liquor. So what has happened is, instead of having the thekas with a government license. They've liberalized that. So there are going to be more liquor stores, allows you to have walk-in liquor stores where you can walk in and buy whatever brand of alcohol that you want. It incentivizes microbreweries. Also, one of the other aspects is it's allowed 24/7 bars to be open, as well as it's made it much easier to get a license to remain open up till 3 a.m. What this actually does is a lot of people kind of say that alcohol is correlated with increase in crime. But in fact, if you have people on the street, even at night 3 a.m., this kind of reduces crime because there are eyes on the street. If people are going out and about even late at night, I think it makes the place safer. Obviously, you need to have strict drink driving rules. You can always call a cab or have a designated driver to take you back home. But this is a very big positive. Second one is you are seeing Yogi Adityanath has differentiated the excise duty on low alcohol content beer and wine versus the high alcohol content spirits. In India, because of the same taxation, people usually the consumption in India skews towards a lot more spirits because it is cheaper per unit of alcohol. This leads to probably higher intoxication and more drunkenness versus drinking lower alcohol content beer or wine of a more of a social setting. And what this has done is this is trying to see that while alcohol consumption is rising, by making it affordable for a wider section of society, you are taking away market share from the illicit liquor dens or like the makers of unregulated desi daru, which actually sometimes causes a lot of other health side effects. You rather have people consuming regulated liquor with like a proper standard, which is well regulated by the authorities. So I think that is a very good step, very important step. I hope more chief ministers look at it. Both have also reduced the legal drinking age from 25 to 21. I think if you see around you, there are a lot more people who are below 25 and drinking alcohol, and sometimes they are subject to harassments by authorities if there is some checking. I think this just legalizes what is already being happening. I really hope more chief ministers in India look at this, and hopefully like the few dry states. So one is Gujarat actually does remove the alcohol ban to see how much tax revenue that it can collect. I would like to go back and say one example from history. So Tamil Nadu had prohibition, but when they removed prohibition, the tax collection from alcohol was so high, which enabled them to fund the first midday meal scheme in government schools, right? So that is a very big positive thing which came out of this. And I think similarly, if setting up microbreweries will set up some brands, set up local manufacturing, so that's also a big positive. And we could see some positive effects if this tax collection is spent overall for the society.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that these were the two most unusual people that you would think of to initiate these kind of reforms. But I guess it speaks to like a very pragmatic sense, right, of having such a huge revenue base anyway and making the best of it. Well, of course, I mean, we have to balance all of this out with some other news. So Rahul Gandhi's Twitter account has been suspended last week. Mr. Gandhi's account was locked after he tweeted pictures of the family of a 9-year-old victim of alleged rape and murder in Delhi. Calling it a violation of the law, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights had complained to Twitter as well as the Delhi police. Mr. Gandhi then accused Twitter of interfering with India's political process, following which his account was unlocked. Perhaps preempting a possible backlash, the head of Twitter India, Manish Maheshwari, was transferred back to the US. So, Abhishek, what do you make of all of this fracas?
Yeah, so I think this is continuing on the theme that you had discussed in your episode with Abhishek Asthana, right? You know, more and more we will see these kind of questions and debates come up on what social media platforms should or should not do in terms of regulation or ban of certain people, politicians and other accounts, right? So as you said in this case, so what he had tweeted was basically a violation of India's existing laws. And based on that, NCPCR sent a letter to Twitter to take action against Mr. Rahul Gandhi's account, which they did. Now, along with him, several other Congress party folks decided to, copy his action. And then, so subsequently, I think 30 odd accounts got blocked for a temporary period of time. So the spin that they have put is the spirit of the law is not being followed in terms of the fact that the law is basically being used to shut down the coverage of this unfortunate incident. And two, they said that what Twitter is doing is basically, not uniformly, or they are inconsistently applying these standards, and they are taking cues from the central government. Generally, the opinion was that Twitter is the good guy, right? And who are basically standing up to the Indian government and BJP, etc. And others like Facebook had folded much earlier. But basically, right now, what has happened with this incident is that both sides of the political divide have had incidents where they feel that Twitter has taken action wrongly against. So now, through various ways, both parties or both sides of India's political divide are converging to the fact that Twitter and these other social media platforms are having too much power and then basically interfering with India's democracy. So we have to wait and see what the next steps will be. On ground, I think Twitter has, we saw a news item where I think India's AG or someone like that basically confirmed that as of now, Twitter had got into compliance in terms of the various regulations that they were holding out against earlier. But this latest incident basically tells that it's very hard to satisfy all sides. And also because there is always a manual intervention or manual sort of, logic that is put in terms of, because you cannot regulate each and every infraction that happens. So the subjectivity part of it will ensure that this sort of...
No, absolutely. Do check out the social media episode we did with Abhishek Asthana, right? It covers all of these things in further detail. Moving on, and finally, to end on some more positive news, the Jal Jeevan mission has reached 41% of the target. Over 4.4 crore new households got piped water connection under the Jal Jeevan mission in the last 2 years. The scheme aims to provide tap water connections to all rural households by 2024. Haryana state is making a significant contribution towards the success of Jal Jeevan mission. 12 out of 22 districts in the state have achieved the target. So, Nirav, I know you've been reading up a lot more on this. Could you tell us, what this means?
Oh no. So if you go back, 2 years ago, Prime Minister Modi in his Independence Day address had given a target to have 100% rural households to have a piped water connection and tap water at home. At that time, only 16% were connected. So the target that we had at that time, in 2 years, if we've achieved 41%, that means showing that we are on track to go in 5 years, we will reach 100%. But probably with things gathering pace, we might even be early on this. If you go by the numbers, there are about 19 crore rural households, and by now about 8 crore have got piped water access. What also this does is in society, it changes the role of the woman of the house. Typically, you had a community village well or a hand pump, and women would go collect water, carry it over their heads. You would need about 20 liters per person per day. So for a family of 5, they would make such trips, overall carrying 100 liters or 100 kg of water in trips back and forth. And this frees up time and for women of the household. Also, what this does is improves productivity right at the bottom of the pyramid. This was like one of those audacious goals that a lot of people had said that this is not possible or had kind of written off. Our finance minister, Sitaraman, had also in the following budget allocated 3.5 lakh crores target spending over 5 years on this. And even the spending is on track. So I think this is quite an achievement. It's quite an audacious goal, from being 16% of rural households having tap water, aiming to solve this problem to 100%. Also, tap water at home reduces any waterborne diseases, diarrhea, etc. in young kids, improves like learning. And if you have fewer sick days for a kid going to school, I think the multiplier effects are just enormous.
Yeah. That's absolutely right.
In line with like aim to achieve 100% electrification, I think Bijli Sadak Pani. So I think you're getting more roads being set up. I think this kind of uplifts the real bottom of society in India, and what a few of us urban people take for granted. So definitely, it's a very great achievement. We are on track to achieve it. As you mentioned, Haryana has added a lot in the last year. So right now, the stats, the way it is, about 7.9 crore families have household tap water. Another 7.8 crores are in villages where tap water is available, but their house doesn't have a connection. And about 3.4 crore households are in villages where there is no tap water connection for anyone in the village. So we are this level of monitoring, this level of looking at data and setting ambitious goals and achieving them goes for a long way in like building state capacity to achieve any of these. I think we've seen that with vaccination drives, we've seen that with electrification, we've seen that with roads, even railways. So this is really fantastic, and this helps the whole country to move ahead. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is absolutely seen over here.
Whether it's the vaccination or even Swachh Bharat and so on, right? I mean, one thing is the project management has been remarkable, really, right? In terms
even
of
the Ujjwala scheme for
Ujjwala
LPG
scheme as
gas.
well, exactly, yeah. And something that you mentioned, the effect it can have on health and economy is remarkable, right? I mean, it's a multiplier effect, as you mentioned. Well, on that positive note, we've come to the end of what was yet another wonderful weekly with all of you. We have a couple of very nice episodes coming up. We have one on understanding China with perhaps someone who is uniquely qualified to speak about it, Shri Vijay Gokhale, the former Indian ambassador to China. You can have a look at, he had a lot of perspectives on the Chinese culture and how they approach diplomacy and negotiation. It's a good watch for all the geopolitical nuts. I mean, who are interested in checking out what India and China relations will pan out going further. We also have another episode with author Uday Kulkarni, author and historian. As usual, his books are very, very well researched, a lot of facts and a lot of data. Right. Again, for all the history enthusiasts, this could be quite a treat. So we have 2 good episodes coming up, and I hope you will check them out. So from Nirav, Abhishek, and myself, thank you so much for joining us this week, and hope to see you next week.